Welcome to Klahani. Art Twomey is with us today. Art's an outdoorsman and a filmmaker, and one of his many areas of interest is climbing mountains. Art, it always interests me that there really are an awful lot of different kinds of mountain climbing. It's not what we used to think in the old days, you get a big expedition up and go just walk up a huge mountain. There's a lot of different kinds of it these days. This particular climb that you filmed for us, what kind of a climb is it? How would you describe it?
Well, this is an extension of the type of big wall climbing that's been done in Yosemite and the crag climbing of Squamish Chief and that sort of thing, where very steep walls are tackled. Now we're extending that to a wilderness setting in southeastern BC. I located a group of peaks in that range called the Leaning Towers and went in there a few years ago to take a look at them and found some big walls. These unclimbed walls, because of their remoteness, require quite a arduous backpack to get in there. And we're carrying here gear to stay in there 10 days, if it takes that long, including ropes and all of the technical hardware and food and sleeping bags, and it's really a load. We're carrying on the order of 70 to 80 pounds apiece. Joanna, who's taking this picture here, has just come back from climbing Mount McKinley, the highest mountain in North America, for the second time in 2 years. She's a very experienced mountaineer and in very good shape because she's just been carrying 100-pound loads for 30 days.
Art, is a climb like this really significantly harder because it hasn't been done before? Does that really increase the difficulty of it?
Psychologically, it does. For instance, Everest took many, many years and many big expeditions who were probably capable of climbing it, but just the element of no one had been there before held them back, and now everybody climbs Everest,
It's like the 4-minute mile, once it was broken.
Right. Our first good view of the peaks, of course, is from the pass, and this is the first time that Joe or Joanna have seen them, and they're really excited, of course. No one has ever set foot on these faces before, anywhere, and we're really, really excited about getting onto it. The weather's fine, spirits are up. Now we're into some old moraines, and this is even worse going in here with these heavy packs. One climber a long time ago said, if I had been God, I would not have created moraines. And I thoroughly concur with him. They're just desperate. These are rock ptarmigan, beautiful birds. Joe, who's from North Carolina, had never seen ptarmigan before. Really excited. Bought himself a new camera for this trip. He's only 19 years old. He was climbing from the time he was 14, and this growing awareness of an interest in climbing is manifested here in a young guy of this age being a very proficient rock climber. In fact, if you're going to rock climb, it's really good to start at that age because you're so agile and physically fit. Hummingbirds coming into our tent as soon as we set it up. One of the preparations for the climb is sorting out all of our hardware. We go through and order it on a nylon sling, climbing chalks and pitons, racking them as it's called, in graded sizes so that one can not even have to look when he needs to put one of these things in and just reach down, pick it off.
How long did you stay in the base camp planning out before you started to climb?
Just a day.
That's all it took?
That's all. The weather was fine, we wanted to get up there right away. That's the trouble in these mountains, is that it can really dump on you unexpectedly. So with lighter loads, but still pretty heavy loads, we take off for the climb. These include all the hardware, the food for a couple of days up on this big face. We think we can make it in a couple of days. our sleeping bag, sleeping gear, all of this, we'll have to sleep out on the face on the way.
Boy, at this point of the climb, I would find that very intimidating. It's so mammoth and so big, and you're so close to it there. I would feel really intimidated.
Yeah, I mean, you get really scared. I get scared. I look up and think, oh
just
my
looking
God,
at it, yeah.
I know this is going to be just really difficult, you know? You're so unsure of the outcome of something that it really challenges you. And maybe just the adrenaline trip of being frightened is an attraction. Getting to the rock-snow interface here, it's a little treacherous because there's a large moat behind the snow, and a belay is required to get in there without falling. Here the climbers change boots to these tennis shoe-like climbing shoes. These are stiff-soled climbing shoes that allow the climber much more ease. He doesn't have very much weight on his feet. Joanne places an anchor, piton, so that she can be held there while Joe is leading the first pitch.
That's the first section of the climb, or how would you describe that?
A pitch is just one rope length or less than a rope length. Our ropes are 150 feet long, so we can go out one rope distance of 150 feet or less. You're looking for a commodious or a ledge, so you might stop short of 150 feet to end a pitch. The leader gets real involved. It's real intense concentration, working out the problems of how to overcome a section of the wall. And he sort of loses track of time on something difficult like this. It may take him 2 or 3 hours and it feels like 15 minutes, but to the belayer, it's a real bore, and you get cold and tired and cramped and all sorts of horrible things.
And it's considered uncouth to read at this point.
Some people do.
Is that?
Much to the chagrin of the leader, of course. But that's part of the game, you know. If you want to do something this extreme, then you have to be willing to hang in there and do the belaying. After Joe's finished the pitch, he's up there securing the rope. Joanna pulls her anchor, a piton in this case, and gets ready to follow, carrying a heavy pack as well. So she can't just follow, climbing as he did, and uses a mechanical aid here. He secured the rope, and she climbs with jumars, which are mechanical ascenders, which slide up the rope but not back down. So she's climbing actually on the rope, her feet in slings that hang off the bottom of the jumars. This is called free climbing. Joanna's leading at this point, when she's actually supporting her weight with her hands and her feet on small nubbins and whatnot on the cracks in the rock. Notice she has a point of protection, a runner, that will hold her in case she happens to fall, and that's a nut placement in that instance, I believe. Joe is playing the rope out around his back. This is called a belay, as she takes it out, and that way,
if she falls, he can take up the weight on that bottom rope as it goes through the hook.
Exactly. The rope is attached to the anchor point through a snap link called a carabiner. No one's been up here, so a lot of moss and dirt and everything are in these cracks, and they actually have to be cleaned before you can find a place to put one of these anchor points in. This is a real awkward move she's doing now. Just sort of making intimate friends with the rock. And it's just before one of these moves that an anchor point is real helpful. You know, it may be only psychological. And that's a problem too, the security aspect of whether you can get a real secure anchor. At the top of the pitch, she sets an appropriate size nut in a crack, anchors the line that she's been trailing behind her for Joe to jumar up. Once she's got that anchored, then he can follow. These are the mechanical ascenders. They have sort of a cam arrangement with knurled teeth on them. These are called Jumars. That's the brand name. There are other kinds, but we like these the best. The cam opens as you slide it up, but jams as weight is put on it. Incidentally, there are flowers all along this climb. It was just beautiful. Notice the anchor that Joanna's left there with the carabiner hanging onto it. We're getting quite a ways up the face at this point.
And this is still the first day.
Yes. Jo removes the nut placement that she's made, and so everything is retrieved by the second. Occasionally a big ice avalanche comes off the ice walls on these hanging glaciers. The first day's progress has taken us from our base camp, shown as the orange tent there, up a crack system, approximately halfway up the face to this large ledge. We were really worried about the weather this second day. It was an uncomfortable night, as most bivouacs on faces like this are. Slept about an hour.
That must really sap your energy for climbing if you have to sleep in those kind of conditions and then get up the next day, and it's hard work. It's not easy.
It does after several days of it.
Yeah.
All the climbing hardware has to be sorted again in preparation for another day. Things have gone rather well. The climbing has been moderately difficult, so we're encouraged. There's only one route above us, so we're committed to that. Joanna starts it off in the early morning sun. This is an east-facing face on a real beautiful slab. Jo belaying.
I hadn't really been aware before how much conversation or talking back and forth is necessary between climbers.
Yeah, these commands, the commands between the people on the rope are real important to know where you are, you know, where the other person is. He gets out of sight, and the acoustics are terrible for the most part on a big wall like this. There's just nothing for it to reflect off of it. Just your voice is carried out into space. The wind howls, and if you get out of contact like that, a person can get in trouble up there, and you just don't know what's going on. You don't know if he's got the rope anchored when you're ready to come up. And so voice commands are real important. Simple voice commands, which convey a predefined meaning to the other climber. Real important. And sometimes even a rope command is used when you get out of contact. The climber will just jerk a few times on the rope to let the other one know that it's time to come. Jo's following this free climbing, taking out Joanna's hardware as he goes. He had a rough night, and so Joanna decided to do the first two pitches. She was really warmed up after this, feeling good. Does your ego a lot of good to get out and going. However, the next pitch was something else again. It's very steep. It's running with water on the left there. Jo's real concerned. And so is Joanna, because she can't find any suitable cracks to get her pitons or chocks into. She's looking desperately for it, and she's up quite a ways above her last point of protection. So if she falls here, she's going to go about 70 feet and smash on a ledge. She isn't going to be held by her belay, and she's really gripped up at this point. She finally gets something, but it's not real secure. It's kind of what we call a psychological pin. And there's loose rock all over the place. No one's been up here, so that the rocks are just, after someone's gone through a place like this, then You know, it's kind of cleaner, a lot cleaner, and the objective hazard of loose rock isn't so bad. She's looking for another placement now.
That must be a tremendous danger for novice climbers, of getting panicked in a situation like that and just frozen and not being able to move.
Oh yeah, it even happens to people that are experienced. She's using a bong here to protect herself. A large angle piton that fits in the... It's the only thing that she can get to go into this flaring crack. Then she can progress with the security of what we call a bomb-proof piece of protection. It's easier up above, and the rest of her pitch goes all right. It's steep. It's real steep.
You just can't have a feeling, what am I doing here?
And it just goes up. The other thing, of course, you're in a desperate place, and then the weather begins to go. Jeez. We're waiting for a storm to break right over us. Joe's leading the next pitch, and it was one of the 2 crux pitches on the climb. Joanna belaying. Water running down his arms. Cold, icy water. Snow melt water. Getting the ropes wet. This was real miserable. And real cold for the belayer. But we're encouraged to go on because it only looks like this pitch, and then we'll be on to easier ground up above.
Using this system of climbing, Art, it seems you place an incredible reliance on your equipment. You have to have real confidence in it.
Yes.
You're just completely supported here by it.
That's right. And great care has to be taken in using it properly, because even with this very strong modern ropes and secure anchors and all this sort of thing, you can blow it. Go tumbling down a face like this, it's finished, you know. The second day's pitches take us to another bivouac, still short of the summit, but it's been real hard climbing and we didn't make a lot of progress that day. It looks easier above, but we're going to sit out another night here in a bivouac, waiting for a gray dawn, hoping that the weather gets no fouler, because we're in a pretty exposed position. It'll be difficult to get off of here if it snows or something. Not much enthusiasm for getting out of the sack in the morning with iced up boots. If the weather would clear, the enthusiasm would respond. But at least we can continue on easier ground. It definitely is more broken, and for a ways anyhow, it looks as though we'll be able to continue unroped, carrying our gear.
Must be a great relief every once in a while on a climb like this to not be tied up all the time.
It is. The lifeline of the rope is also a real shackle. When you're just tied to it all the time, you can't be free.
Is this what you'd call a chimney when you
Yes.
have a formation like that?
And what she's doing is chimneying.
That makes some sense.
Leave our packs and continue on up some real enjoyable free climbing to the summit. Much easier than what we've come across below. The summit, of course, has a cairn on it, left by the first ascent party who climbed it from the backside, an easy walk up, in 1933. And this is the only other route that's been done on this peak since 1933. In fact, it's only the 5th ascent of the mountain altogether, and of course then the first ascent of this east face. Joe has a look at the ascent record, left there in 1933, still intact. A. McComb, 1933. They were from Winnipeg, and they climbed it in half a day. We took 3 days to go our way. So Joe's leaving a record of our ascent. There'll be other routes on this mountain that'll be done by people more competent than us, but we are real pleased to have the first ascent on this entire face. Camp is a long way below.
Is it ever?
It's probably 1,800 feet, 1,700 feet in vertical elevation, almost directly below us. And the descent is made by the method technique known as rappelling, or abseiling, German name.
That's just plain silly, Art.
No, this is real secure. You put in an anchor and loop the rope through it, and then let yourself down. You can see here's an anchor point with a sling hung around it. It's real secure. Both ropes are used so we can descend 150 feet at a time. And the friction of the person's weight is taken up in the rope's passage through these brake bars, or carabiners. The rope is just controlled by the climber's hand behind him. This is what you always see. It's real spectacular, you know.
Yes, it is.
But in fact, it's real easy. Just a matter of, if you don't mind leaning out over a...
Actually, if it was a bit closer to the ground, it looks like fun.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people... well, that's how you learn.
Now that is the part of it that tends to bother me a little.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, when you can't get a real solid anchor, my heart's in my mouth and I start going down off of a place like this. Joanna's using a little different rappelling technique called a Dulfersitz, or a modified Dulfersitz. It goes over her shoulder. Notice the rope's over her shoulder there, and through a carabiner at her waist. When the rappel is finished, then the rope is pulled down. Pulling on one side of the rope retrieves the rope from the anchor point. At least you hope it does, if the ropes haven't been twisted. If they get twisted, they often jam up above. So that's very important to keep your wits about you.
So you don't have to climb back up and untangle it.
Right. The knots can jam in a crack up above. There are all sorts of things that can happen, and a lot of care has to be taken, a lot of thought given to these sort of possibilities. So that's how we climbed a mountain, the hard way. And there's still faces to be climbed there. Who knows, we'll probably be back in there again next summer, trying something just a little bit harder.
Art, that kind of climbing is really exciting to watch. I'm not sure I want to get any closer than that, but it's really exciting.
Yeah, it sure is. I get pretty gripped up sometimes, to tell you the truth.
I'll bet. Thanks for being with us again, Art.
My pleasure, Dave.
That's Kwahani for this week. Art Twomey has been our guest. Join us again next week, won't you?